Hello, my name is Erica Bradford, um, and this is my cultural and religious considerations of grief work presentation for CLS 710. My topic was Micronesian Americans. I am going to apologize in advance if I sound extra congested or if I cough a bit too much. I ended up getting COVID while working on this assignment, so this has been fun trying to find a break where I'm not coughing so I can record this. I chose Micronesian Americans because my school district actually has had an influx of Micronesian American immigrants in our area. Um, and I have and have had Micronesian students. It is a brand new culture to me, and I wanted to take this opportunity just to learn a little bit more about them. I did know that family was incredibly important to them, um, and along with doing this research project, it just reiterated how important family truly was to them. Like many cultures, they're taught to respect their elders, which I see a lot of um, within my community. They only discuss personal matters within the family. So they don't go outside of their family members and talk about family matters. Like they don't go and gossip. It is quite amazing how tight knit their circles are. So another thing that I had noticed within even my students and with the research is um, the family members, they either all live in the same household or like neighborhood, or they try to at least. And even if they're not blood related, they they have their children call the elders like aunts or uncles. So I have a student, and unfortunately, she had come to school one day and she said my uncle died, and I was very thankful for this class to kind of help me help her through it. And I had come to find out that it is not biologically her uncle, it was some other form of a relative, but they call him uncle. She didn't even know his first name. So it's the amount of family members that they include is just astonishing, which is something to be pretty proud of, I think. Their beliefs and their customs. So a lot of Micronesian Americans have Christian values and beliefs, kind of mixed in with indigenous beliefs. So it's like Christian, Catholic, Mass, Rosary, mixed with um, kind of worldly, spiritual, and um, not. Um, oh, now I'm losing my train of thought. And more or less just like spiritual beliefs, contacting the deceased. They do believe in heaven and hell. They also believe they can communicate with spirits. They had the research had mentioned using Ouija boards and other forms of communication. Some of them had said possession of female relatives, but it wasn't a scary possession, and it wasn't a scary form of using the Ouija board. It was more or less a letting the dead know that they're dead, and also comforting them and then comforting the living and giving them guidance. So if a spirit is possessing a female relative, they're possessing them and communicating to the other family members that it's okay and that they can move on and what to do with their lives next. It was very interesting reading that portion of it because I thought it kind of contradicted the Christian and Catholic beliefs a little bit. but it's kind of their own religion. Um, yeah. And then their customs, when a loved one dies, they begin to pray immediately. Prayer is a huge, huge aspect within their culture and their customs, especially with death. So, like the Catholic religion, they believe in kind of like a purgatory. So, when a loved one dies, they believe the more you pray for them, um, it helps move their soul and their spirit up to heaven. So there is a reoccurring number that I found within my research. Um, it was the number 9. So when I had talked to one of the Micronesian English language learner paraprofessionals, she had stated that on the island, if somebody were to die, they would contact the church, and the church would actually ring the bell 9 times, and it would let the whole island know that somebody had passed. And then later, on another slide, you'll notice 9 again. Um, the grieving process lasts days and days and days, and a lot of the times it lasts about 9 days, and they actually bury their dead on the 9th day. So they are praying for about 9 days straight, either for the person, for the family, or with the family at the casket. Um, it's just a very long process. And during the grieving process, there is little to no physical contact, um, especially if you're not within the family. So a lot of the times it would be handshakes. Um, and if you are immediate family, then maybe you'd give a hug. But if you are just like a friend or somebody from the island coming to show your support, you'd maybe give a handshake while you were walking through um, the household. Um, it's not a funeral, but it's kind of a wake where they're grieving the person who had passed, and the casket is actually there with the person in it for 9 days before they bury their loved one. So, some expressions of grief that they may have, um, loud cries from the women, especially. So, the men they didn't necessarily specifically talk about, but they did mention how um, the women's grief was shown a little bit more, and you could hear it. A lot of the times the women will cry over the casket or near the casket, and the women will all kind of group together to show support for each other. um, they will also, like I had said before, pray for days to help the soul travel to heaven. Family and friends show support by gifting money to the family for food. So, like I had mentioned earlier, with the island will ring the bell. Even if you don't know the person that passed, it's such a close knit community that you show up and you give support to that family and you donate money. There's usually a box that you can donate money into. That money will go towards funeral expenses. And it's not the traditional funeral like the ones that we have in America, or it will go towards food for the family since there's so many people that show up and they're there for days on end. It is also for you to go by and kind of express your sympathies. Um, Another thing that I found to be very interesting was when you show up to the house to show your support, they'll be singing songs. So you might have people crying in the background. Some people are singing and praying with the family and attending the funeral, but there are also speeches that are given. Um, some of these speeches are talking directly to the loved one. Some of them are talking to everybody in the room. Um, it was pretty cool to read about it. So the ceremonies are not typical. They don't have funeral homes. They don't go to a church and have a funeral and a funeral procession. It all happens at the house of the deceased. Um, and they mourn them for days. So the speeches that I was mentioning, they're grievances. So they might be apologies or they might be memories of how they had hurt one another, and they're coming and trying to like make amends. And one of the research pages that I was reading had said some even believe that this way, when they're discussing their grievances and they're apologizing and making amends, it will prevent them from becoming sick. So I thought that was intriguing. Part of me was thinking maybe they're feeling like sick to their stomach that they didn't get to do this before the person passed, and maybe that's them preventing from getting sick, or maybe it is a genuine getting an illness sick. The funerals tend to be large, like I had stated. One, because they have massive families and they all show up. And if they're in America, a lot of the times the families will take those funds and they will actually send the body back to their island, and have them buried on their homeland. I thought that was pretty neat. And Micronesia is huge. It's small, but it's huge all at the same time. So each island is different, and they might have different languages and belief systems. So they're close, but they're not exactly all the same. Um, yeah. Then if they are burying them um, out back on their island, they like to bury them near the home. So either the home that they are um, coming to, the deceased person's home, or if it's like a family home, they don't necessarily have cemeteries, which I thought was pretty interesting. And this happens on the 9th day. So the bell rings 9 times to symbolize somebody had passed. You're praying for 9 days. And the final burial is on the 9th day after the person had passed. So up until that time, that person is in the casket in the house having people grieve over them. And another thing that I thought was interesting was cremation is not an option. Um, this, I could not find any reason for why it was not an option. I had talked to Starlene. She was the um, English language learner paraprofessional that I had talked to, who had stated cremation was not an option. And then some islands and some families have kind of like a mass, like a Catholic mass afterwards. It's not necessarily a funeral and it's not church, but it's kind of a mixture of the two. And here are my resources. And at the bottom, you'll find Starlene's name. She is from the Chuuk Island, and they speak Chuukese, and that is where one of my students is from. And I had another student a few years ago who was from Karen, and he actually spoke Karen. So it's kind of interesting seeing the difference between the two different islands and two different forms of Micronesia. So yeah, I hope you learned a couple of things.